a board with me because we like to do this as a group. I want to thank you for your appointments to our Parks and Rec Board. It's been a pleasure to work with our board over the last year or so. The appointments that you've made have truly made a difference in our board meetings, and I hope that Dan has been sharing that with you. Really quality volunteers that you have serving on that board. I don't know if you can hear me very well.
Yep.
Sometimes we don't know what we don't know. I think that's been the case with our Parks Administrator position. When we first hired the administrator for the Parks Board, we knew that we needed some staff. We knew that there was a need there to help manage our grant program, help us develop budgets, negotiate with vendors, and generally assist the board with activities. What we didn't know is what a difference an experienced and professional park administrator can make to a county that's trying to manage 2 existing parks with the goal of becoming a premier recreational destination point, as stated in the county's strategic plan, with only a volunteer board to execute that. In 2019 budget year, we presented a 2-year phased plan approach to increase the park administrator hours from approximately a quarter time to a third time for the first year, and then to half time the second year, or slightly less than half time, keeping in mind those parameters for benefits. We believe this phased approach would be responsibly ensure that the requested hours were indeed necessary to meet the ongoing operational duties. But even with the park administrator's hours increased to a third time for 2019, the administrator is still volunteering hours that have resulted in actually working close to half time, and still he sees the volume of work remaining at the end of the month. It's more clear than ever to the Parks and Recreation Board that we must move forward with the requested .4625 full-time equivalent for 2020. When we compare the administrator to similar work performed by others, this degree-required position is extremely underfunded. We respectfully request that the pay rate be increased from $15 an hour, which really is an entry-level position rate, to $20 an hour as a more appropriate compensation for this position's responsibilities. I think we can all agree that even at $20 an hour, this is still a heavily discounted rate for a professional park administrator with Ron Welton's experience. At that rate, salaries would increase an additional $7,540 a year, plus the employer expenses, for a total requested increase of $8,179. In this year's budget, we also asked for an additional $5,000 in grant funding. Each year this grant program has been offered, the applications have become more and more exciting and impactful. Unfortunately, last year, for the first time, we were unable to award grants to all the recipients that had been submitted, outstanding applications. An increase in our budget would enable us to expand that program. Another major source of the proposed budget increase request for this year was to pursue developing birding and water trails in the county. We believe these trails draw residents from near and far to explore ecotourism in Berry County. On behalf of the entire Parks and Rec Board, we thank you for the careful consideration of our budget request, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Catherine?
Thank you, Catherine, for your request. First of all, why is this position a degree-required position? Who requires it?
Well, it's something that the nature of the position requires. It's not a person to go out and empty trash cans. We're asking for the administration of our parks,
Okay.
Which is a master's level educational degree.
Right. And you say that the current situation, the administrator's working a lot. What exactly does the daily work entail?
So it's not just the on-the-ground administration at the park where I'm sure when he was managing Porcupine State Park, he had seasonal operational staff to go out there and make sure that the restrooms were clean and not vandalized, that the bridge and the park was in general good repair, trees down, that sort of thing. But it's planning for what we do next. So, for instance, he's out there, he sees that the park is being used a lot during the day, during the week. We didn't know that because we would show up for a program maybe a couple of times a month at McEwen Bridge Park. He notices who's using it. So, for instance, this last meeting I had with him, he said, our bathrooms, although the bathroom itself is accessible once you get in the bathroom, residents with mobility issues can't get from the parking space into the restroom. So that is all gravel. It's at too much of a steep incline. None of us would realize that. You know, so that's what, you know, sort of takes that on the ground, eye level perspective.
Mm-hmm. Lastly, tell me more about the birding and water trails.
This is really exciting, and I think in the next maybe month or so, you're going to see a birding brochure that was developed by the board. It highlights birding hotspots in the county, what you might see there, and how to get there. A little bit about each site. Birding is a great ecotourism activity. People do it all over the state. They look for these birding brochures and they use them to visit communities, and when they do, they go out to eat, they spend money. And it's a very low impact type of activity. And the same with the water trail. It just guides people from point to point where they can get on and off a river and what is around that area to use when they're there.
How do you look to enhance the water trail?
It's mostly wayfinding and securing those safe exit and entry points.
All right, thank you.
Questions for Catherine?
I just have a couple of comments. I think one of the things that Ron has is he's seen what successful county parks are about. And when you've seen excellence, you tend to want to get to excellence where you're at. And I think that's an important part of growing Berry County, not only economically, but just for recreation and good health for our citizens. One of the things that really impressed me with Ron is before he even, he went and he saw that there was a toilet lid missing in our McEwen Bridge Park toilet area. He went out and bought it himself and installed it. I mean, he wasn't asked to do that. He cares about parks and what they look like, and he wants people to enjoy the parks and that. And so he takes on some responsibility. He goes to symposiums and spreads a word about Berry County and their trails and that too. And we need somebody who has had an understanding of not just trails and water trails and that. We need you know, an understanding of a full picture of it, ball fields and volleyball teams and whatever that can be done for recreation for our residents too. And we just, and his expertise is very, and everybody respects him. Dan Patton just has a tremendous respect for him, his wisdom and other things that he's experienced. And he's got a good way of going about doing it too. And we just want to take advantage of that while we can. I think it's important for the growth, if we're really serious about of us having a Parks and Rec department, let's do it right. And I think he's one of the guys that can bring us to that point. I don't know of anything else that I'd want to say at this time, except that you're going to get a lot of, we're going to get a lot out of our money. Let's just put it that way.
So when you say you're increasing his work hours 182 a year, well, how many is he working right now?
He's
He's working more than that.
right.
But
Currently,
we're
his
looking at
position
19 hours
allows.
a week.
Currently, his position allows at a third time, 780 hours a year.
Right. So the .465 goes to the
19 hours a week?
the 182 additional hours a year.
Yeah, it goes
I mean,
to
you divide that by 12.
962. It would go to 962 hours a year.
I was talking about a week.
19 hours.
Oh, 19 hours? Okay, that's what I meant. Are you right at that? The threshold?
.4625 is 19 hours a week.
Okay.
Yeah, 18 and a half, 19. And that keeps him under that benefit threshold.
Right, and
I
that's,
was asking.
And it probably keeps him under a certain tax bracket too.
Right.
Having a retirement.
yeah,
he's gonna
I'd hate
watch
to
some of
say it,
those
but I mean,
things.
we really have hit a sweet spot with attracting somebody. We're lucky to have him in our community. He's willing to serve. I don't imagine how this compares to his last hourly wage when he left the state, but this is very much a glorified volunteer position for him. But we also have to recognize that we can't get that for nothing. He really brings a lot with him from his career.
What would be the requested budget then for Parks and Rec?
It was
Page 21.
83,875.
83?
83,875.
I say the request that I have says 75,644.
That's
That-
because the salary increase was pulled out. It was in our original budget request.
It's on the bottom there. If you look, you'll see Parks and Rec Administrator on page 21.
Okay.
3.75 to 4, to
Oh.
.4625. So that's on a separate item.
I see. So you requested it, but you just requested it as an addition to the 7584.
So what was the other $12,000 requested for?
So that is let me grab that sheet. For $5,000 in additional grant funding. Right now, our grant program is at $10,000. We had over $31,000 in requests this year. And like I said, for the first time, those were hard decisions because that $31,000 that was requested were all great requests. There was $5,000 to develop the birding trail, water trail, and the Metcalf Lake project, which is a partnership that is forming with Battle Creek Parks. It's a park in the southeast
Township.
corner, Assyria Township. Yeah, it's a great opportunity, and we haven't fully developed it, the potential yet, but there's partnership with the Calhoun County Conservation District, the Berry Conservation District, Battle Creek Parks, and Berry County Parks to provide some great recreational opportunities there. $2,000 in mileage expenses. We hadn't been paying mileage, and our park administrator is driving all over the county for projects. There was $500 in additional youth day, some office supply increases, and yeah, I think that covers that additional 12.
This birding trail thing, I'm not into birding, okay? But I get lost one day, I went over to camp, I was looking for campgrounds, and I got over by Head Lake, and I'm going through, and I'm gonna try to get to 131 from Head Lake and the back way. And found that out. And I'm going down a gravel road, and there's this lady along the side of the road, and her car's there, and I'm thinking, well, I'll ask her, she'll know, she lives in this area. I says, could you tell me how the best way to get to 131 from here? She says, I'm from Washington, D.C., and she's sitting there watching the trees, and she's got binoculars in her hand. And she says, I'm over here to do birding. We hear that Berry County is an excellent place to do birding. And all of a sudden, she's going to this I don't know what it was, some sort of meeting with birding and stuff, and one of our guys on our team, Doug, was at that one too, and I said, where are you staying? And she said, I'm staying at the Holiday Inn in Hastings, and so on and so forth. So there's some things going on here that I don't know about that's I'll tell you.
No, we even have a commissioner named Hoot.
Yeah, that's right.
And one with wings.
And Wing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Always
We
flying
can
by
work
the seat
with
of her
that.
pants.
Take control of this, Catherine, it's going downhill.
Anyways, there's an economic thing here that I don't think none of us really grasp with this, and I just we want to keep that moving. So that's all.
How much,
Got a question over here.
Okay.
Now, I just want to get this straight in my mind. They requested 75,644, recommended 63,621. And now, I've lost it. It's up to 83,875. So between what's recommended and what they want is about $20,000. Am I right on this?
That's what it looks like.
Okay, thank you.
Do you understand that that's separated, that 8,000?
Yep.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
And that's it. That's with that $5 increase too per hour.
how much, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
how much did you say the travel was?
2,000 is what we estimated in the budget.
$2,000 a year?
Yes.
Any other questions for Catherine? Go ahead.
When you said two parks, are you counting McEwen
The-
and Charlton Park?
McEwen and the trail.
Oh, the trails, okay, thank you.
Yep.
I forgot about that, sorry about that.
Yep.
Sorry about that.
No, it's from one end of the county to the other.
I know that, but I just had.
Anything else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And then Vivian, you had stuff from SISMA.
Yes.
Is this yours?
Yeah, when we were here, now this is their monthly newsletter, but when Sarah Nelson was here giving her your report, and she was reporting on the invasive species, especially the Japanese knotweed, the handout that I gave you is that was provided in her report showing the different areas where there are these invasive species. And we had talked about, she had asked about cost of $1,026.34 for the treatment of Japanese knotweed in the rights-of-way along the county roads. So I wanted to remind the commissioners that we had talked about that, and I would like to put that increased item of, I'm gonna say $1,027, just to round up. Oh, yeah.
Lost my
I'm
vote.
waiting for you to finish, but I got a question.
Now, that's too much money, Vivian.
Because she had asked for it, and so I'm bringing it back because we said we would take it up during the budget workshop.
I personally think that we should raise it to about 2,000 because that is a nasty species, and that's for the right-of-ways. And I think you're gonna have private property owners calling and saying, I want something done with this. Every township meeting that I've went to, they've been very interested. They want Sarah to come talk about it. So I don't think that $1,200 is gonna be enough. You raise it to 2,000, that would give her enough money to spray some private property too.
Well, I do know that at the Prairieville meeting last week, there was talk of a possible site there, which, you know, and they're finding it all the time. Heather said that,
I found 5 clusters right along M78 that were not on her map when she was here, so.
That's why I think that she was very conservative on her.
and her request is down $1,000 this year because we had given her $1,000 last year for the service on their vehicle that they purchased. So we had approved $31,500 and she's only asking for $30,500. So, but 2,000 sounds great to me. So, because it's growing. People don't know how to treat it, and it's gonna continue to get
Well,
bad.
people treat it on their own, it gets worse.
That's what she said, that they were mowing
One
it.
of the sections they had mowed, I saw another plant that resembled knotweed in somebody's front yard and they were cultivating it. So, I'm like, don't you know what you're doing?
So, I agree, but I just wanted to remind the commissioners that we did say we'd take that up during our budget workshop, so I'm requesting. I'll say 2,000. Thank you, John.
This is a very serious problem I think we got coming.
Right.
Is there anything else we need to address for our budget appeals?
I'm gonna have something, I'm gonna have them make a presentation this year, and we'll do it out of this year's budget. Nothing for 2020.
Okay. So, anybody been keeping a tab on what we've been spending besides me? So our contingency was 141,700. If we give equalization, they're 24,626. Economic development, they're 6694. Conservation easement, the original request was 25. They're in here for 10 if we upped it to 15. Parks and Rec, 20,254, and then Conservation District. We have just cut our contingency fund almost in half. We are down to $73,126. Give or take a few cents, because you know I'm a social studies teacher, not a math teacher.
Madam Chair, I just comment that I, the same numbers you did say for Parks and Recreation, I came up with 20,000.
Right, I'm
But
close.
anyway, so recalculate that.
I probably am off by a hair too, so.
That is very thin.
My, chicken scratch over here.
That is a lot thinner than we've had in previous years. I think the thinnest we've
Lot,
got,
the
The
amount,
contingency.
the contingency.
the contingency left.
Yeah, that's.
Right.
I think I want to say the lowest we've dropped in that is 30,000. Does that sound about right, Michael?
Pretty tough
Started
times.
the
yeah.
year with?
What was it down when Joyce was chair? I think that was the lowest we had.
Right off, but
It was low.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
we have contingency left for 19, right?
I don't know.
you do in your budget again on page 21, under contingency, you have under the amended column, $82,010 currently in contingency for the 19.
Remember, if the money that we don't use out of that fund goes to pay for computers and phones
Vehicles.
and vehicles. and-
Furniture.
That doesn't go very far if you're buying a vehicle.
So, all of these little budgets, what they don't use, that's how we've been able to keep our capital replaced on a good cycle. So it is going to be, the 82,000 is going to be used for good purposes if this board doesn't do anything with it. Now, with the knotweed thing, I think that's a small enough request that we could probably pay for it out of this year's contingent. But that doesn't free up a whole lot more for out of next year's contingency.
Not trying to be picky, I mean, but pick on anybody in particular, but I mean, I know that we did ask equalization about perhaps limiting their person to the 19 hours, which would reduce some of that cost. Would still give him a part-time person, but it would reduce the benefits. I don't know if that'd be a negotiating tool and even.
Is that
Parks and-
equalization person in the union? That part-time person, would they be?
Yes.
So there's some limitations there in what you can do for a part-time position. What the union will allow you to do as well.
I have a question. So right now there isn't a position because they got rid of it. But
Right. But
It was.
if you create it, though,
Yes, if
then the
it's over.
union will have some say in what that position is gonna be.
But if it's 19 hours, then would they have to have benefits if it was the 19 hours?
We
Or
would
less.
still have, work comp unemployment.
Right, but I mean,
Not your cost, not the
Right,
health
not
insurance.
health
or
insurance,
retirement
that's what
cost of
that's those.
Right.
I
And
didn't know if that
and
was
kinda-
negotiated, I mean, if it wasn't
Or less, it's not a negotiated.
okay, so I was just thinking that might be some way, I mean, and then he would at least have almost a half, 4.465.
I don't know how that changes that amount, though. If we change it from, what does he have now, 25 hours, I don't know how that changes the budget, what the amount is. Because he didn't have that broke down like Parks and Rec did.
Yeah, because it's,
He's got the projected amount of, that's what that part-time person is gonna cost. Well, where did it go?
I'm not sold on the request, to be honest.
equalization,
Right. I think before we go start hiring staff, we need to find out where the breakdown between the mapping department and his department is. If there's an agreement that IT services is supposed to be providing some service to his department and they aren't, then that needs to be addressed. And I'd like to address it first between the departments before we hire somebody to fix it.
I think, with equalization's budget, the $500 from his, office supplies, postage, and training budget, I think, I don't have a problem with that. It's the 24,000 for the part-time that we maybe
Right.
need to negotiate, or have a little breakdown better.
Well, we better figure it out, because there's nothing worse than calling a county department that says call and set up an appointment, and there's nobody there to answer the phone.
Exactly.
That's really.
But we also know that equalization is, they mail stuff out, and I know postage has gone up in
Right.
the last year.
Yeah,
so.
I'm not saying that, I was just simply talking about the
That,
position.
but that part of his request, I think, I don't even question the extra $500 there.
Equalization, or was that just something we done?
So there isn't a formal agreement, if you may, between IT and equalization. Mapping previously existed when in the mapping department, Dave Schinover took over then IT services. This is dating back a while, but when we moved IT across the street, or actually previously, we took the mapping individual Rose Anger and put her into equalization, and the purpose was that she could do some assisting in equalization, able to do the mapping work that the mapping department needed, as well as assist equalization. Over time, she spent more time on equalization and less time on mapping. And not that mapping didn't need the amount of time, but mapping needed some, equalization just had a more of a demand. Mapping fell behind a little bit, if you were. When Rose Anger resigned and took a job with the state of Michigan, knowledge, if you may, for mapping and to train and bring somebody new on is with Dave Schinover. He's the director of that department. So that, and as you'll recall, we moved that position back over to Titan Center under IT and mapping, which left then a void, if you may, in Tim's department. Part of the issue right now is that IT mapping is going through a process of training somebody. We had somebody that was admittedly really efficient at what she did, knew it really well, had a long history, and just could do it. We're now, IT mapping is training a new individual to do that job. And as it happens to be, the individual that took the job was promoted from within the technology department. So then there was a situation where not only did mapping have a new position, a new person that needed to be trained, but IT lost their technical position, so the person that was being trained was doing both jobs until they could bring a new IT person in, and they have that person. Leslie has been brought on board to backfill Matt, who then became the IT or the mapping specialist. So a lot of moving parts I get. I apologize for the complexity of that, but there is admittedly movement with which information is flowing right now isn't nearly as expedient as what it was when Rose was here, and when Rose, let me back up, for equalization, as when Rose was here, and more specifically when Rose was sitting right in equalization's office. So a number of things, and take some time to get that up and running, and hopefully that helps a little bit.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Equalization is a mandated department. I mean, it's not, the other ones are, and I'm not saying, but I mean, it is mandated and the others are non-mandated. But I mean, like I said, I don't want the phone that, yeah, that's, doesn't speak well of the county to don't have someone manning at least a little bit of the time.
Yeah, that bothers me too. But how much extra are we paying out because of the over 19 hours? I mean, how much is that costing us? Would it be better to hire 2 people for 12 hours apiece and have that taken care of? If it's just answering the phone and getting to the right source, if there's not, if it's just answering a call, and a divided week, sometimes that's a very good job for somebody, part-time job. And I'm just wondering if that's a possibility, or that way you wouldn't be paying benefits on either one. But
We haven't had this situation yet because we haven't, but at some point we do get where the union would step up and say, hey, wait a minute. If you have two people doing the same thing at a part-time, where one could effectively do that so that we don't incur benefits, I think we potentially risk that the union will at least challenge that and say we should have one person doing that.
have you ever seen that happen, where they would question that?
I haven't. We haven't done that at UMA. Now, there might be situations where we would, because of schedule something that would make absolute sense and could defend that, hey, wait a minute, here's why we have two positions as such. But
Hard to defend that.
potentially could have that issue, because it is a position, save for the fact that it's less than 19 hours, it is a bargaining unit position, obligated to follow the
Conservation District, they had that administrative position and they couldn't fill it because nobody wanted to work for the low dollar at less, just 19 hours. They just, I mean, she couldn't get anybody that was interested.
Right, and are we gonna be having turnover in that position? If you hire somebody in equalization and it's a technical position, and it's only,
I understand, I just was mentioning that,
Yeah,
maybe
I
we could
agree.
try it for a year. Like I said, it is a mandated position, or a mandated budget item, department. They do have things, but that's why I wondered if we could make it the .465 or whatever that number is, and at least, reduce the benefits.
David?
I'm okay with the equalization position. I think we need to enhance customer service. I just would rather see it in the 15 to 19 hours this year. I would support that if we could keep it at that range for this year. I don't think economic development is out of line, and Heather and I had briefly talked about this, but I think the $15,000 for ag preservation is reasonable. The county has not spent a lot of money on ag preservation. What we had discussed or talked about was the potential. Their budget is $10,000. Maybe we look at $15,000 as a one-time allocation, because if the next budget cycle, where there's actually some state or federal money available, is 3 to 5 years down the road, and they come back, then I think we can be willing to support that as needed. So I don't think, like I said, ag has not cost the county very much over time. It's been very small budgets. With parks, Dan, you can chime in on this, but I certainly think to have someone, the quality of the individual that we have as the administrator, that is worth the $8,179. I'd like to see that the additional amount pared back to maybe $5,000, where $2,500 could go into grants and $2,500 into other miscellaneous expenses, travel, stuff like that. which would take that from 63,621 to 76,800 for the total. You know, plus, 76,800 versus 20,000. That makes it a $13,000 increase. Parks has gone from 34,000 in 2017. Now you're talking 76,000 in 2020. So we've continually enhanced that a little bit, but I mean, like I said, we've got a really good individual, and I think he's worthy of our support in there.
What did you say that final figure would have been? 60 what?
63,621 was what was recommended. The 8179.
No, but what did you say, reducing, making the reductions that you
Oh,
were thinking?
76,800.
6.8?
76,800. So I think that's a nice bump for parks as well, and takes care of some of the issues. And then I think after Sarah's presentation, the $2,000 is certainly reasonable to take care of that, so.
What was economic development, did you say, how much was it?
6694.
This is 6,700.
6,700?
I think these are good recommendations, Dave, and I would move the committee adopt Dave's recommendations.
Let's make sure we got them all wrote down first.
I want to make sure too. So are you saying to keep him at the 8,179 then? Administrator?
We're gonna add the 8,179, which is his pay raise from 15 to 20 an hour,
Okay,
plus 5,000, half going to the grants, half going to support for mileage, office supplies, mailing, stuff like that they had talked about, so.
so we're talking,
So we're talking more than they've requested.
No, they requested to about 20,000 when you look at the position down on the bottom. So it's
Oh, I'm sorry.
8179 plus.
I'm sorry, I forgot about that down here.
so you're talking about keeping the 8179 and then deduct, taking away 75, something from the 75,644?
Yeah, the recommended amount was 63,621.
Yeah,
Then you're adding the 8179 to that, which was the request pay increase for the position. And then you're also adding 5,000 to that for grants and expenses.
so you're talking about cutting the grant money
From 5,000 to 2,500.
oh, so you're talking 12,500 in grants?
Correct.
Okay, all right.
So your total is 76 we're taking it from 63,621 to 76,800 total.
So you're not wanting to fund the birding or the water trails.
They can use that 2,500 however they want. They could actually use that 5,000 however they want, if they'd rather put it into birding trails.
Okay. So you're essentially cutting the 7,000 off of it. So if you looked at their request, it was 75,614 plus 80 or 8,179 for a total of 83,875. So if we just give them the 76,800, that's about $7,000 off of their request.
But a $13,000 increase.
Instead of a 20.
Right.
I'm not against anything that Dave said. I would like us to look into funding some of that out of this year's contingency, so it don't all come out of next year. And I know we have to fund cars and stuff, but I think if you look at some of them fund balances, we'll be doing all right. For cars and capital fund.
You wanna do a one-time allocation on a contingency for parks for 5,000 for birding, water trails?
I was thinking
5,000.
economic development and conservation, do them out of there. And I'd entertain most anything you come up with. Do we have to do this today?
I won't be here next week. I'd like to, but that's my fault, not anybody else's.
Yeah, I think we've pretty much got a consensus, it feels like. Taking money out of this year's contingency makes sense for park grants, to me, because it's durable capital.
The 5,000 that you mentioned, however they wanted to spend it, yeah. I mean, it's a one-time, it's not like the wages or,
Right.
I don't know
Yeah,
about the.
it's just,
I'm writing.
Thinking about, I know you were in agreement about the 15 to 19 for equalization on that. I don't know what the difference would be, by reducing the hours, what the cost would be without those benefits.
Michael can get that back to us next week for finalization.
yeah.
Well, we're just moving this on then. Okay.
Well, I want to get straight on the Parks and Rec. What are your recommendations? Anybody that?
76 is what David come up with, and I'm not against that. I believe, wasn't that 76 something, David?
76.8, and we had just mentioned the $5,000 grant out of contingency this year for Parks and Rec for the birding and water trails.
Out of contingency?
Out of contingency.
Out of this year's
Out of this
contingency.
year's contingency.
And the 2,000 for, the conservation district out of this year's contingency.
Or the auditor's gonna want us to.
So 76 plus 5 then.
Correct.
So that puts it
No.
right up to the 83.
What do you mean 76 plus 5?
76.8 is the total. That,
The
and
5,000
the 5
Right.
is out of contingency.
contingency
for
this year.
Okay, so of that
So
76.
it's really only $2,000 short of what their,
Grand short of what they were.
of their request. So rather than increasing by 5,000 for their grants, maybe they need to just increase their grants by 2,000 and make the mileage come out of that.
Okay, all right.
They can make that work.
Yeah. And then, but that gives him the
The wages.
full wages. Okay. All right. I'm happy with that.
We're gonna look at the estimated cost for the position for equalization next week? Or do you have that, Michael? We'll look at that next week.
Okay.
And you wanted all of the economic development, all the money?
60. Economic development.
And we could take that out of this year's contingency too, and still wouldn't, and then ease up on the contingency for 2020.
Yeah, I
That'll
would go
only
with
be-
Michael's recommendation in that.
Yeah.
Wherever it comes from.
The 19
Are you
contingency?
and I disagreeing?
Just, we haven't had a lot of, we haven't made it a habit of pulling out of this year's contingency when we're planning for next year's budget. I just don't want to make this a precedent. I mean, this is pretty much equal, economic development pretty much is funded like a department.
Yeah, it's mandated, yeah.
Can we still ask questions like to Travis?
Oh, not
Economic.
economic development, I'm sorry.
So I would rather have a low fund balance in contingency and pay for economic development's increase out of that than start playing the
Use
shell
our
game.
leftover money from this year to
Yeah.
pay for next year's stuff. Dan had a question for Travis.
Travis, when I was on the economic board, I went and got money from the village and the township to throw into the economic alliance. Are we still doing that?
Yeah, our current, we don't have our 2020 budget set yet, but for our 2019 budget for the current year, right now, the county agreement makes up roughly 61% of our total revenue. So the rest, the 39% is from a combination of private fundraising and some fee-for-service.
So is the village writing you a check? Giving you money?
Like the village of Middleville,
Yeah.
for 2019, they have not yet.
Okay. All right. Should hit them up on that stuff.
I don't know, we just have asked three to make some, we're asking three to make some concessions and not for two, so.
Say that again, Vivian.
We asked three of the requests to make some changes.
Yeah.
To reduce a little bit, and two we have not. I didn't know how anyone else felt about that, but.
Any other recommendations?
We need a motion, or are we okay with giving this to Michael to format and bring back to us next week for approval?
Want to make a recommendation that follows with your actions at the committee level, and then we'll put that into the format and bring it back to the board next.
So we need to do it for each one then, as we go? Or are we all have a consensus on?
I guess if you have a consensus on it, I think that's true, I'm okay with that.
What would you like to recommend for the other departments? I mean,
Would we say we were 2,000 less on Park and Rec? Is that what you figured, close to what, with everything? I think that,
actually, we were $5,000 short on, well, not really.
but, when I mean the difference between the position, but I mean, I think that, you know, maybe reduce each of those other ones by 2,000?
Or take it out of the commissioner's budget. We don't spend all of our mileage money.
I try.
I mean, they were requests, and I'm just, you know, we have asked 3, and even, like I said, to reduce, and they have agreed, and,
Well, I can
Or I
tell you
don't know,
that
they
the
haven't agreed, but-
conservation easement budget is their request is a whole lot less than their original request. So, when I saw their original request, I went back and said, this is not gonna fly, you need to think of a different number. So, and that their additional request is very much, they're shooting at a target, but they're not sure what the target's gonna be because of the nature of this application cycle and then the way that the ordinance changed. I don't see that money being, a perpetual amount at this time. I think their regular budget depends a lot on whether or not they can get the support locally from another department. I just don't know what that annual budget's gonna be right now. I think that I think planning has some room to expand, some things there that we may be able to work into.
you mean planning our department?
Because they have some staff there that's not full-time. So there's maybe room to do things there.
I mean, I just wanted to make sure
as
that
far
we
as-
were talking about the same.
As far as an administrative cost, I mean, in that $10,000 that she's recommending, I mean, if we don't do anything right now, we still pay for her consulting fees for this cycle, because once you start it, you should probably follow through with it. But that $10,000 figure she had in there was what she figured it would cost us annually, to maybe move somebody from a half-time to a three-quarter time or whatever to help accommodate the needs of conservation easement. In the future, I don't know that, I mean, that's a moving target that you're trying to hit, so.
Could we request that of the 6694, that like 3,000 be dedicated to the CAMA program? At least know that it's helping our young people with jobs.
Are we talking about?
Look at it.
Already funding 15,000
Yeah,
for
for skilled trades, yeah.
skilled trades. But that was put in the budget a couple of years back that we've continued to roll. And forgot about them in that sense, it's there.
But would the money for that CAMA then go for Mr. Schneiderhan's? Does that cover go any towards Mr. Schneiderhan's compensation?
I guess that was my question.
So Mr. Schneiderhan, you said his being funded from some startup programs, and you did not know if you would be able to continue to get those money for him?
Yeah, we're actively looking like some new funding sources to backfill that, yeah.
Could we request that out of the 6694, that 3,000 be dedicated towards that? So that we have somebody there leading that program for those young people? You see what I'm saying?
I know what you're saying, but the 15,000 that was allocated
Okay, all right.
a few years back, that for skilled trades included some for Mr. Snyderhan, right?
It's basically been for the programming end of things, it hasn't been direct salary, it's been for, we've utilized that for everything from, promotional stuff for the program, busing for getting kids to tours as part of CAMA and those sorts of things that
Oh.
PCC doesn't cover, if that makes sense.
I mean, he's been a great advocate for that, and I just don't really want to lose him or see his position cut or whatever. So, to me, that is a very needed program in the area.
That is fine with me. I would hope that Travis would use it to the best of his ability. But
76,000.
if he wanted a certain amount set for that, I'm not against it.
Correct.
I mean, that would kind of ensure,
I still think the ones that we come up with that are a one-time thing, like,
conservation.
yes, and preservation, possibly a one-time thing, and then a few years down the road, another one, should come out of this 19's contingency, and the ones that are ongoing, take out of 20. But, my idea. But I think we gotta come up with something, give Michael directions and move on.
Correct. There you go. I'm looking at my squirreling.
And maybe we should let Michael make that decision. Isn't that what we pay him for?
So what was our increase on Parks and Rec appropriation? We went to 76.8 plus 5.
76.8 plus 5, with the suggestion was that of this year's contingency for the grant for birding and water trails.
76 plus 5?
63,
Yes.
621.
Well, then that's actually more than you requested, right?
No.
Yeah, it's a 1,000 or 2
Original
less.
request was 83.
Yeah, it's 18,179 versus 20,254.
Oh, I thought you said the 76.8 was the new total,
Yeah, 76.8 is the total.
but then plus an additional 5.
Yeah, that's the 81.79 for the pay increase, $5,000 for expenditures and grants. But then it was also recommended to take 5,000 as a one-time grant out of this year's contingency for the birding.
So from our contingency, that would be $66,499.
If everything come out of 20.
Right. 66,499.
I thought the whole total. on
And that would
Parks and Rec
leave
was
us 75,
76.8.
then it would leave us with 75,000 in our contingency instead of 73,000. If everything came out at 20.
I thought the total on Parks was 76.8.
The total on parks is 81, isn't it? 823?
It is if we take the 5,000 for birding
And
trails out
water.
of this year's
We give them a
contingency.
one-time gift for that instead of budget it.
That's, I think, is what Vivian didn't understand.
Yeah,
And you're,
I thought he meant the 5,000. He said 63,621, 81,79, and 5,000 for grants or however they wanted to spend it. I guess I didn't realize that then there was another 5,000 on top
What
of
we
that.
essentially cut was their mileage request.
Yeah, I think that's, but we have that option now.
Right.
76,800 out of 2020. 5,000 out of this year's contingency.
Any other discussion? Do we want to make a motion, or are we going with a consensus?
Consensus.
Alrighty,
Consensus?
and then Michael will have final numbers for us next week.
Discussion will carry on next week.
I'm quite sure.
Will.
You're back me next week.
Almost everything except for the 5,000 for the birding and water trails.
You can text me.
That would come out of 19.
Get all that, Rebecca?
Only the 5,000.
You get all
Thank you for
that?
working that out, Bill. That's good.
So far.
I mean, the whole thing. That was quicker than I thought.
Alrighty, where's my notes? What did I do with them?
Yeah.
So we'll move that discussion to next week for items for consideration.
Economic.
Is
That's,
there anything else that needs to come before this committee?
yep.
At this time, any member of the public wishing to address the committee may do so for up to 3 minutes. Seeing no limited public comment, is there any other business to come before the committee? There being no further business and without objection, the committee is adjourned.
There it is.
Get all those numbers
Too many-
flying around, it starts getting confusing.